Tonight, cost of living help for struggling households at the heart of the state budget. Also, pro-Palestinian protests spark a war of words between the Greens and the two major parties. King Charles leads Britain's commemorations for the 80th anniversary of D-Day. And Alex de Minaur's run at the French Open comes to an end. Good evening, Jessica Harmsen with ABC News South Australia. A more than $250 million cost of living relief package has been unveiled as the centrepiece of this year's state budget. The Premier and Treasurer are framing the budget as one for the future, with hundreds of millions of dollars allocated to housing, skills and early childhood education. But the state's health system continues to be a significant pull on taxpayers, and while the budget is in surplus, debt is set to climb sharply. State political reporter Rory McLaren begins our coverage.
Climbing up to try and lower cost of living pressure on South Australians. The Malinowskis government's third budget doubling down on its second with a targeted $266 million relief package.
It allows us to provide more to those who need it most.
Included is $51.5 million for an additional one-off payment to concession holders to hit bank accounts before July 1. There's more than $54 million to expand the sports voucher program for families and $24 million to reduce the cost of school materials. The package is smaller than last year for a reason.
The federal government has provided much broader, more significant cost of living relief.
With SA's public hospital system still under an internal emergency, an extra $466 million has been needed in the last 6 months to keep it running.
Is health in South Australia a bottomless pit?
No, we're having to make the investments to keep up with demand and also the cost of providing these important services to the community.
Overall, nearly $1.9 billion in extra cash is required over the next 4 years just in operating expenses. That doesn't include investments in health upgrades like the new women's and children's. With an eye to the future, an additional $610 million will go on skills, on top of the previously announced $715 million for 3-year-old preschool.
Whenever we make the big decisions around the cabinet table, we are trying to think about the 2030s.
Which includes calls around housing. There's the axing of stamp duty for first home buyers building a new home, and the government is ready to step in to give more funds to SA Water if needed to provide services to developments.
But we're going to make sure that we calibrate what we're doing in conjunction with what SA Water's approved to do.
Debt will grow as infrastructure projects like the Torrens to Darlington start major work. It'll jump from $31.7 to $44.2 billion in 4 years' time.
A debt bomb that is going to be passed on to future generations of South Australians.
We wanted to see more for business, more for South Australians, and less debt as well.
We remain comfortable that debt is not only sustainable but affordable.
A $306 million surplus is expected in the current financial year, and surpluses are predicted across the whole budget period, fuelled by extra revenues, even with the state and national economies slowing over the last 12 months. Rory McLaren, ABC News.
Stephanie Richards joins me now to break down the budget in more detail. Steph, what does this budget say about the challenges confronting the state government?
Well, Jess, the budget shows the health system has become a funding vacuum for the government more than 2 years after it entered office, promising to fix the ramping crisis. Despite an almost $500 million health spending blowout over the past 6 months, the system is still sick. Health is a key political battleground, and the Treasurer hopes a record spend will help fix the system, which, less than 2 years out from the next election, remains in crisis. The government's also throwing more money at the ambulance at the bottom of the child protection cliff. An extra $70 million has been spent over the past 6 months to support children in non-family-based care. But no new money is being spent to stop children coming into contact with the child protection system in the first place.
And Steph, how's the budget being received so far?
We've already heard from the opposition, but key interest groups are broadly supportive of the budget. Health unions have welcomed extra hospital and ambulance spending, but they say more workers are needed.
It's all well and good to have a hospital bed, but if you press the call bell and no one comes, it's not much good.
Social service organisations support reforms to the state's concession system, but say more housing is needed beyond the 2,800 dwellings included in the budget.
In order to address the housing shortage in South Australia, we need them to build more than 1,000 properties a year.
The government is trying to sell this budget as one that's looking towards the 2030s, pointing to spending on early childhood education, training and skills. But by the 2030s, the state is expected to have racked up a mammoth debt bill that future generations are going to have to pay off.
And we'll have a look at the state budget winners and losers a little later in the bulletin. A truck driver who hit 2 high school students in Adelaide's eastern suburbs last year has pleaded guilty to dangerous driving offences. Sang Van Huyn drove through a pedestrian crossing on Kensington Road near Marriotteville High School, leaving 2 16-year-olds with serious injuries. Huyn previously pleaded not guilty over the crash, but changed that plea in the district court today. The matter returns to court next month. The Greens leader Adam Bandt is threatening legal action against the Attorney-General over comments linking him to violence at pro-Palestinian rallies. At the same time, the Greens are accusing Labor of complicity in genocide and not supporting a ceasefire. Here's National Affairs editor Melissa Clark.
Labor MPs are frustrated by protests at their electorate offices, where there has been graffiti, property damage and physical confrontations.
You only need to look at the sort of things that Greens are posting on social media and their attendance at the blockades of MPs' offices.
Federal and state Greens MPs have encouraged people to protest.
So please come and join them outside Prime Minister Albanese's office.
But Labor has also accused the Greens of inciting violence.
You're not a party of peace if you're out there inciting aggression, violence, violent protests.
We backed the organisers' calls that there should not be vandalism or similar. We have been crystal clear on that.
Labor hasn't shown a specific incident where the Greens have directly encouraged violence. The Greens leader has threatened legal action against Attorney-General Mark Dreyfus for suggesting it.
My lawyers have written to the Attorney-General regarding what I consider to be defamatory statements.
The Greens have used social media to press the politics.
Labor is complicit and cowardly in this mission of genocide that Israel is conducting against Palestinians.
And make highly charged claims about complex issues.
They've said we're selling weapons to Israel when we're not. They say that we support genocide when plainly that is a completely offensive and distressing thing to say.
Even discussing a ceasefire becomes febrile.
We voted many months ago with over 150 other countries for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire.
What they've called for is a humanitarian ceasefire so that there's a pause so that people can be fed and then the bombing can start again.
As the war in Gaza drags on, the political debate here has deteriorated, raising concerns about the cues protesters take from it and the impact it has on community cohesion.
It's appearing like a signal, like a beacon going out, and it's whipping up a mob who are then protesting.
Hopes for de-escalation abroad and at home. Melissa Clark, ABC News, Canberra.
The National Anti-Corruption Commission won't launch fresh investigations into 6 public officials involved in the robo-debt scandal. After 1 million Australians were targeted by the robo-debt scheme, which unlawfully raised debts of more than $1.7 billion against social security recipients. The final report of the Royal Commission into the saga had included a sealed chapter recommending further civil or criminal action against people involved in the scheme. It was provided to the Anti-Corruption Commission, which has today said it won't pursue its own probes as it's unlikely to uncover anything new about the officials' conduct. UN Security General Antonio Guterres has delivered a blistering speech calling for urgent action on global warming. Mr Guterres says almost 10 years after the Paris Climate Agreement was adopted, the goal is hanging by a thread. New UN data shows there's an 80% chance the planet will breach the warming limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius within the next 5 years. At a major speech in New York, Mr Guterres called fossil fuel companies the godfathers of climate chaos.
We are playing Russian roulette with our planet. And we need an exit ramp off the highway to climate hell. And I call on leaders in the fossil fuel industry to understand that if you are not in the fast lane to clean energy transformation, you are driving your business into a dead end and taking us all with you.
Palestinian authorities say at least 27 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes targeting a school in central Gaza. Dozens more have been rushed to hospital as rescue teams search for survivors inside the Nuseirat refugee camp. Israeli officials say 2 missiles were fired at the school, which it claims was being used as a Hamas compound. Hamas has denied the allegations and is calling the attack an horrific massacre. The IDF says it took steps before the airstrike to reduce harming uninvolved civilians. Violence has erupted at Israel's annual Jerusalem Day march, with some Jewish Israelis attacking Palestinians and journalists. Middle East correspondent Alison Horn reports from the Old City in Jerusalem.
I'm standing at the entrance of the Muslim quarter in the Old City of Jerusalem. Usually this is an area that would be teeming with Palestinians, but today they've all been moved out of this area to make way for thousands of far-right Israelis and Jews to march through the streets, marking Israel's capture of East Jerusalem in 1967. Before the march even started, tensions were running high, with confrontations between Palestinians and Israelis inside the Muslim quarter. Journalists were abused, including myself and my crew. I was hit in the face. We were pushed and verbally abused by some young Israelis taking part. We've been hearing some Israelis chanting offensive slogans like "Death to Arabs" and songs about burning Arab villages down. This annual march, the Flag March, is seen as a celebration for Israelis and for some, their supremacy over this area and this land, which Palestinians want as the capital of a future Palestinian state. For Palestinians, this is an offensive provocation in the ongoing Israeli occupation of East Jerusalem, according to international law.
It's chaos, and Palestinians are getting beaten. And even me, they beat in the legs in front of the police.
What occupation? It's ours. The land of Israel was given to the people of Israel.
Rights groups in Israel had tried to block this particular section of the march going into the Muslim quarter here in the Old City, fearful it would further escalate hostilities between Israelis and Palestinians.
Alison Horn reporting there. Vladimir Putin has held an extremely rare face-to-face meeting with international news agencies in St. Petersburg. The Russian president told journalists the deliveries of German tanks to Ukraine came as a shock. Germany recently joined the US in authorising Ukraine to hit some targets on Russian soil with long-range weapons they supplied to Kiev. Mr. Putin said use of those weapons would mark a dangerous step and could further undermine international security. He warned Russia could provide their own long-range missiles to others to strike Western targets.
For some reason, the West believes that Russia will never use nuclear weapons. If someone's actions threaten our sovereignty, we consider it possible for us to use all means at our disposal.
King Charles has led Britain's commemorations for the 80th anniversary of D-Day, one of the most pivotal moments in the Second World War. In France, as the sun rose over the beaches of Normandy, US Navy SEALs reenacted the events of 1944. The day pays tribute to the Allied soldiers who fought to drive out the forces of Nazi Germany and to liberate France. With war raging on Europe's borders, this year's ceremonies carry special significance.
A fitting backdrop for a moment of remembrance and reflection to mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Sitting alongside royals and other dignitaries, veterans and their families, 99-year-old Roy Hayward is one of the few still alive. He lost his legs in the war.
I always considered myself one of the lucky ones that survived.
He and more than 150,000 other Allied troops, including thousands of Australians, set sail from Portsmouth in the largest ever military operation to liberate Nazi-occupied France, a major turning point of the Second World War.
Today we remember the bravery
of those who crossed this sea to liberate Europe.
It is our duty to ensure that we and future generations do not forget their service and their sacrifice.
After the formalities, the royals charmed the crowd.
So you must be 100.
Oh, I'm 99.
99.
Yes.
It's amazing your hearing's so good.
Prince William is joining King Charles, with the pair travelling to France for more D-Day commemorations. It will be the King's first overseas visit since the palace revealed his cancer diagnosis in February. US President Joe Biden is also in France on a trip designed to underscore his commitment to US allies in Europe. In Normandy, paratroopers recreate the start of the D-Day landings.
My thoughts today are with those who fell on both sides.
Freedom at the cost of so many lives. Rani Hayman, ABC News, London.
Returning now to our coverage of this year's South Australian state budget. The government has spent big on measures aimed at alleviating the housing crisis and easing cost of living pain for those who need it most. But in areas like health, the money's largely aimed at just keeping up with demand, while a major arts and culture project has missed out on new funding altogether. Isabel Damon breaks down the budget winners and losers.
Struggling households are the biggest winners in this year's budget. 210,000 will receive a one-off $243 payment over the next 3 weeks. The government's doubling its sports vouchers program and expanding it to kids' music lessons. Parents and caregivers will save $200 on public school fees next year, and another 15,000 healthcare card holders will get access to public transport concessions. Another big winner is housing. As announced earlier this week, the government will spend $576 million over the next 12 years to build 1,900 homes in Adelaide's west and south. To make it easier to purchase a house, first home buyers will no longer have to pay stamp duty on new homes or builds. The state's education system, particularly early childhood, is another big winner. The government has set aside more than $700 million to implement universal preschool for 3-year-olds. 2 new schools will be built, one in Adelaide's north and one in Mount Barker, and skills training courses will also benefit from almost $700 million in extra funding. While there's new money in the budget for an arts investment fund and new spaces, the state's Aboriginal Art Institute, Takari, has missed out on a much-needed funding boost again. With the federal government's contribution still up in the air, the future of the North Terrace site remains uncertain. A huge $2.5 billion is being poured into the state's struggling health system. But much of that money will simply go towards covering cost blowouts, and even more will be spent on meeting soaring demand for hospital services. The government's also spending more on beds and ambulance services in an effort to meet its key election pledge to fix the ramping crisis. Overall, surpluses have been forecast over the next 4 years, but state debt is expected to swell to more than $44 billion. The Treasurer says the government's borrowing is affordable and sustainable. Even so, it's an eye-watering figure and a burden future taxpayers will have to carry.
And state political reporter Rory McLaren will explore the budget further in a special Stateline interview with Treasurer Stephen Mulligan in tomorrow night's bulletin. That's on ABC TV at 7 p.m. Australia's oldest woman is celebrating a major milestone today. She's turning 110. Lorna Henstridge lives at a nursing home in Bordertown and celebrated the occasion with her family. Miss Henstridge is the oldest woman and the second oldest person in Australia, behind a New South Wales man who's about 8 months older than her. She says it's important to stay positive, not drink too much alcohol and, above all, stay active.
I just keep on keeping on. I've always liked exercise, fresh air, interest in people, and being active all the time.
Coming up on 7:30 with Sarah Ferguson, one woman's battle to save her home from destruction.
It is my home.
This is all I know. When you are responsible for something, you care about it.
I'm in awe of her strength to keep at it because it's correct.
I need people to care because I care. I care with all my soul.
To finance now, and the local share market performed strongly today after Wall Street had its biggest gain in 4 months. Here's Alan Kohler.
The main New York index went up 1.2% and the Nasdaq 2%. But it was all about Nvidia, the artificial intelligence semiconductor business that surged past $3 trillion in market value last night, overtaking Apple to take second place to Microsoft on the world's most valuable company podium. That's $4.5 trillion Australian dollars, which is twice the total value of all companies listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, which went up 0.7% today. And the big news on our market was that Commonwealth Bank hit a new record high of $124.85. But before we do high fives, CBA's value is less than 1/20th of Nvidia's. And here's a chart of those two share prices over the past 5 years, which is one of those pictures that's worth 1,000 words. Today's economic data release was housing lending in April, which accelerated to 4.8% monthly growth from 3.8%. Loan sizes have hit record highs of $750,000 for owner-occupiers and more than $500,000 for first home buyers. Now, repayments on that are about $3,300 a month, or 45% of average weekly earnings, which is 50% above what's regarded as affordable. Nickel fell 4% on commodity markets, while the Aussie dollar stayed at 66.6 US cents. Now, you may be interested to know that the average global temperature has hit 1.63 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial times. So the Paris target of 1.5 degrees has come and gone. It might fall back below 1.5. After all, there is a fair bit of volatility there, but not that much. And the trend, well, you can see the trend, and that's finance.
On to sport, and Alex de Minaur's best run at a French Open is over after a straight sets loss to German Alexander Zverev in the quarterfinals. The Australian was unable to convert his chances during the 3-hour match, but said he left his heart out on the court.
Big night for Australian tennis.
World number 4, Alexander Zverev, had the answers during the first set. The 25-year-old was unable to
wasn't good enough.
De Minaur will move back into the top 10 ahead of Wimbledon next month.
Hopefully that takes a lot of momentum and confidence onto the grass.
His innocence.
Barbados, with all-rounder Marcus Stoinis starring. Batting first, the Aussies lost early wickets to some brilliant catching, but Stoinis saved the innings, hitting 4 sixes in 1 over as he made 67 off just 36 balls. He followed it up with 3 wickets, which included a clever boundary catch by Tim David as Oman fell 40 runs short of victory. Australia is seeking to become the first country to hold World Championships in all 3 formats. In rugby league, Joseph Kuso Suaalii has apologised for his knockout tackle on Maroons star Reece Walsh in Game 1 of the State of Origin series, insisting it was purely accidental. The incident in the 7th minute was the pivotal moment in the series opener as Suaalii became just the 6th Origin player to be sent off. He was offered a full match ban by the judiciary. Down a man, the Blues were brave in the second half, but the Maroons ran away with a 28-point victory. It included a hat-trick to Hamiso Tabuai-Fidel. The 38-10 win is Queensland's biggest Origin victory in Sydney. Weeks after thinking his Olympic dream was over, Australian marathon runner Liam Adams has earned a late call-up to the Paris Games. Adams was ranked inside the top 80 eligible runners, but initially missed out due to the addition of athletes from smaller countries taking up universality places. The World Athletics has now included the athletes who qualified on rankings, sending Adams to his 3rd Games. He'll join fellow Australians Brett Robinson and Pat Tiernan in the men's marathon.
It's really played on my mind a lot, so it's been really tough to train in that. And when I got the news, it was just a burst of energy. I was just so excited.
St Kilda looks set to be boosted by the availability of Max King on Saturday night for their game against Gold Coast. The 23-year-old will face his brother Ben for just the third time in their AFL careers. They'll join the Mackay brothers in a weekend of sibling rivalries.
Before training, there was doubt.
If he gets through pain-free, he'll play.
But after a smooth session, Max King looks set to face the 8th place Suns on Saturday, meaning the 23-year-old faces off against his brother as the Suns search for their first away win of 2024.
We don't want to be a victim to the Gold Coast Suns. We want to fight the fight, and we want them to be in a battle with us.
Ben and Harry Mackay were an almost certainty to play on each other in front of a packed MCG on Sunday, but both Essendon and Carlton don't want the novelty to overshadow an important game between the two rivals.
Largely, it'll most likely depend on where on the ground Harry sets up for the majority of it, because we certainly like Ben in certain spots.
Brisbane channelled the Maroons at training today as they come out of their mid-season bye in 13th, 10 points outside the 8 ahead of their game against the Western Bulldogs.
Yes, we are in a precarious position, we know that, but thinking about that's not going to help us win games of footy. It's just focusing in on what we need to do.
Similar optimism can be found at Arden Street as North Melbourne sets up for the second half of the year. Steadfast they'll soon get their first win this season, perhaps this week against the 16th placed West Coast.
We know where we're going, we know where our vision is, it's hard work.
And only getting harder with matches against multiple finals contenders in the next 3 rounds. Fraser Fife, ABC News.
On to the weather details now, and tonight's photo was taken at Barossa Sculpture Park and sent to us by David Partington. It was dry and partly cloudy in the city today. It reached a top of 17 degrees just before midday after an overnight low of 8.3. Further afield, there were areas of fog and low cloud across most districts this morning, with light isolated showers about the southern agricultural area. It reached 19 degrees in Oodnadatta. To the charts, and thick cloud over central and southeast New South Wales is generating heavy rain and the odd storm in a deepening trough. Cloud building over WA's west and south will produce a few showers, but it'll be mostly dry elsewhere under a high. Looking around the country, clear in Darwin with 29 degrees, 20 in Brisbane, cloudy and 14 degrees in Hobart. Closer to home, mostly dry with top temperatures below average in the north. It'll reach 16 degrees in Whyalla and Port Pirie. In the south, cold at first with areas of morning fog and frost, 14 for Clare and 18 in Kingscote. A frost warning's been issued for the mid-north for tomorrow. Mostly cloudy in the city tomorrow, the chance of morning fog about the hills. We're heading for a top of 17 degrees, dropping to 7 overnight. On the waters, variable winds to about 10 knots and seas below half a metre. Sunrise about 20 past 7 with sunset about 5:15. And looking a bit further ahead to the 7-day forecast, showers developing Sunday with a top of 17 degrees, a top of 19 forecast on Monday and a rainy 16 degrees forecast for this time next week. And that is the latest from the Adelaide newsroom. Thanks very much for your company this evening. Make sure you stay with us. Sarah Ferguson's up next with 7:30.